And good evening, everybody, on this wonderful Sunday evening. Karen and I are grateful that you're here. We're thankful that you're able to join us while Fern attacks the country, and we've worn these warm vests for you. What do you think, hon?
Our thoughts and prayers are going out to everybody affected by this storm. Seems like it hit extra hard in the south. It's always not a good thing.
Yeah.
So, know that we're thinking about you guys. I know a lot of people are without power and school's canceled tomorrow for many of you. So we're grateful that you're here with us tonight. Hopefully you've got a warm beverage nearby and maybe a snack or two, and are here to come hang out and just be with us on the interview room.
And we have a special guest. We didn't think he was going to make it because his internet got knocked off.
Yeah, because of the storm.
But you guys know him as the one and only.
You know him and you love him.
If he could jump into a phone booth, he would. And he would come out Dr. Gary Mercado.
Hi, Gary.
How are you?
Good. Thanks for being with us tonight on our Sunday Night Live here on the interview room.
Sure.
This is a surprise for the audience because we didn't tell them you were coming.
Okay. Well, hope it's a pleasant surprise. I see a lot of familiar names in the audience.
Yes. And we only have one. If this is your first time here at the interview room, we only ask a couple of things. Number one is that you subscribe to our channel. You also hit the thumbs up, and so that the algorithm picks it up on YouTube and spreads it all over whatever YouTube algorithms do, and that you also share it with your friends and family because that helps our channel to grow. Our goal this year is hopefully over 300,000. That's going to be the goal. And the second thing we ask is that you go to Amazon and you pick up Dr. Mercado's book, The New Evil. And this is one of the best books in all true crime. And we are always grateful to get his time. And yes, Dr. Mercado is in New York. And Gary, how does it look in Manhattan looking out the windows there?
It's pretty blanked out. I mean, the snow is very heavy, but it sort of transformed into a icy rain, and which makes it sort of dangerous, and everybody's just sort of either shoveling or hunkering down in the house. So everything's very still and quiet. But I was laughing because I went out to church and it was very, very empty, and the priest said to me, "You're like a missionary the way that you came out in the middle of this." And I said, so he said, in these conditions, and I said, well, I wouldn't miss it. But it was quite an experience getting out.
So what brought you out into the snow?
Other than to go to church, nothing would have. But that I had to do, so I went.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And what is on the agenda tonight, hon? Where are we going this evening?
So tonight we're going to talk about the latest update in the Luigi Mangione murder trial coming up.
Oh.
we've got some new information. If you haven't been following the last federal court hearing that happened on Friday, we've got all the details for you. But first, before we do that, just a couple quick things. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our amazing mods real quick. Miss Sophia, Maui Girl, Mimi J2, Laura, Waldy, and Teresa M. Thank you, ladies.
And Teresa's husband is having some issues recently. So we need to keep Jeff in our prayers. If everybody, and when you get an opportunity, please say a silent prayer for Jeff. Because they're Teresa's husband.
Yeah,
they're
they're
dealing
going
with a
through
lot.
Yeah.
And Miss Sophia just spilt a drink on her computer.
Oh,
By accident.
I've done that before.
oh yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's awful. I had to march out and go get a new one, which is very painful.
Very painful. Very painful.
But
anyway, so tonight, let's do a quick overview. First of all, the victim in this case is Brian Thompson. He's 50 years old. He was a CEO of UnitedHealthcare, a major U.S. health insurance subsidiary of UnitedHealthcare Group. The incident, as you recall, occurred December 4th, 2024, where Thompson was fatally shot outside the New York Hilton Midtown, right there in Manhattan. How far is that from you, Gary?
Oh, not far at all. I've passed where it happened a number of times. It's it's a short walk from where I work.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm right in the heart of a lot of things. I'm like a couple of blocks away from where they arrested Hoyerman. And it's like all these kind of cases right on top of on top of me there. But yeah, it's not far. Short walk.
Well, I remember the picture you sent where you stood right where he threw his pizza.
Yeah, the abandonment DNA or whatever it is. I went and took a picture in front of the trash can where they arrested Hoyerman across the street. Well, he worked only a few blocks away.
Okay.
And they arrested him at the pizzeria where he was having lunch or whatever, and he threw the pizza in the garbage, and they that kind of thing, and they came and arrested him right there. But yeah, it's like blocks away.
So you're like a crime magnet.
Yeah, I'm like the Forrest Gump of crime. It's like whenever something happens, like there I am. It's like very strange.
Lieutenant Columbo.
Yeah, I have a little Forrest Gump like.
Wow. So in this case, the shooter approached from behind. He fired 3 shots at close range, and fled on. He used 3 different type of escape vehicles. He first fled on foot, then he used a bike, and then a scooter. And there were shell casings were discovered at the scenes, and they were inscribed with deny, defend, and depose. And those have been widely interpreted as critiques of insurance denial practices in the UnitedHealthcare system. The subject arrested and is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Allegedly, the shooter is Luigi Mangione. He's 27, former University of Pennsylvania engineering grad from a prominent Maryland family. And he was arrested approximately 5 days after the shooting, December 9, 2024, at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Nothing like getting taken down while eating a Happy Meal. And we just lost Gary, but he'll be back. Maybe the snowstorm Fern got him. After a nationwide manhunt triggered by surveillance, and Gary is back. Fern did not get him. He has returned.
The internet blipped out.
After a nationwide manhunt was triggered by surveillance, footage, fingerprints, and a tip. The key evidence against him currently is a backpack seized at his arrest, which contained a 3D printed ghost gun, which they believe was the weapon used in the crime. It had also what they believe was a silencer. He had fake IDs, cash, notebooks with writings, and a handwritten manifesto declaration, which we're going to get into Dr. Bricato's mind in a little while on the manifesto. But it was only 262 words, and it criticized the health industry as parasites. Did I miss something, Karen?
No, I think you've got a lot of it. And what Chris is talking about, what police found in Luigi's backpack at the time of the arrest is now the continuing subject of these hearings that we're seeing in federal court, especially the one on Friday.
Yeah, and so they right now where the case stands is it is in the Southern District of New York. He's been charged with murder, stalking, firearm offenses, which also includes the use of the silencer. And the prosecutors have not removed the potential for a death penalty from the table. He's also charged with second-degree murder as relates to the charges and terrorism charges, which had been dismissed earlier, which he was originally charged with. At this time, he has pleaded not guilty to any of the charges. And his defense team also started a GoFundMe, which has currently raised over $1.4 million
to date.
$1.4 million.
It's a very interesting thing, Chris, because in a way, Mangione addressed the question of whether he was motivated by terrorism himself in his own writings. If you recall that he actually goes out of his way to say that, for example, the reason you wouldn't bomb the headquarters of a healthcare company is that innocents might be killed and it would equal terrorism. He actually says bombs equal terrorism, so that he goes out of his way to target a specific individual. He says, because then there's no innocence. Just imagine that what he's suggesting is that the person who's killed is not an innocent, right? So in his mind, this person is the victim, and there's no innocent bystanders that get killed. So therefore, he sort of sees it that it's not an act of terrorism, but it's sort of an assassination or a hit on a bad guy in his mind, right? So it's interesting that was removed.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I want to talk about in terms of his mindset, because I also want to go into Ted Kaczynski tonight.
Okay.
Because that was kind of in his, in some of his writings, in his diary. Yeah. And it's almost as if this pop culture concept has taken has gone to a different level. What do you think about that, Gary?
Well, it's complicated because, the thing about Kaczynski and Mangione, if he's found guilty, is that in both cases you have these people that are seen by a subsection of the culture as these kind of Billy the Kid, kind of romantic figures that are doing something that they sort of feel is, it's a little different than Billy Kid, because they see it that the person is almost like fighting against an evil cause. Like, for example, I read that 1 in 4 Americans thinks that Mangione was righteous in attacking the CEO of what he considered a parasitic entity. With Kaczynski, it was all about the environment. That people he was like what we called environmental terrorist, with the idea being that he is a serial killer, actually, because he killed more than 2 or more people with a cooling off period. Mangione is not accused of being a serial killer, although I have to say, if he was not captured, he looks an awful lot like people that would go on a spree and kind of eliminate multiple people that fall into the web of people you're mad at, but we don't know. But with Kaczynski, there's this sort of lionizing of him, and you're seeing that a little bit with Mangione. The big difference, of course, is that Kaczynski was seen as an intellectual hero to some people, but they didn't have sexual attraction to him. With Mangione, there's a sort of strange attraction thing that's added to it, that smacks of a kind of narcissism, where people are gassing his head up and talking about how attractive he is and free him because I want to marry him, this kind of stuff. And you didn't see that with Kaczynski. But both are examples of there being something, I think, deeply sick in the culture, which is a whole other conversation. But the fact of the matter is, the lionization of Mangione because people think he's desirable or that what he did is righteous is, I think, disturbing. Do you also find that disturbing? I do.
Yeah,
completely. Yes.
Go ahead, Carol. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, every time we talk about this, this was one of the big topics that came up at CrimeCon in September in Denver. And, they actually did a little straw poll of, maybe whatever, 3,000-4,000 people sitting in the audience listening to a panel discuss this. And the question was asked, do you think, something along the lines of, do you agree with the group that believes that Mangione had a right to do this, almost, that they weren't appalled? And a percentage of the people in that audience said, yeah, we think that this was something that we supported Luigi for doing. And the rest of us were shocked. We were just shocked. But so every time we talk about this, I have to just pause and get my mind around the fact that there are people who are, as he's lionizing him, that and I don't really understand it, because in my mind, murder is murder. Okay, well, let's have the trial. Everyone's innocent until proven guilty. There's a lot of evidence against him, and you just don't see this with other cases to this extent. And, thank goodness we have this on video. But, ultimately it's going to be up to a jury to decide this guy's guilt or innocence. But again, it's always kind of a mind blow to me that there are so many people that support this guy.
Well, because if you see someone as targeting somebody that you think is bad, if you're in the part of the population that's been, let's say, hurt by drug companies or things like that, insurance companies, something like that, I think drug companies, then the idea is you would see this guy as like a protector. And then it would be sort of sexy. In other words, this is like the equivalent of the guy who bopped the guy in the head who's picking on you in the bar. It becomes, in your mind, it's attractive because the person is a protector figure. And I think that's how you have to see it, is that on top of it, they find him, they think he's sort of movie star-like in his appearance. So you combine that with the fact that they see him as a protector, and he becomes very attractive to them. And I think that's a kind of romanticized idea. I mean, the fact is, if someone said to you, look, this guy was picking on me in a restaurant and saying, dirty things to me, and then my boyfriend pulled a gun out and blew his brains out, I wouldn't see that as a protective thing to do either, unless the guy was threatening to kill you and it was like a self-defense thing. But to pull a gun out and kill the person because they were doing something that was, you found, hurtful or whatever, and somebody protects you in that way, that's not really a fair balance, because the reality is that this man was just sort of walking down the street and stood for something that was predatory. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, it's not really a fair comparison, but I think in some people's minds, that's how they see it. That he's a protector, like a David and Goliath thing. He stood up against the giant bad guy.
I agree. I agree with Barb Olson, who just made a comment in our chat that what's changed since this guy gunned down the UnitedHealthcare CEO? Nothing. Nothing has changed. What good came out of this? I mean, to your point, Gary, I'm kind of just taking it to the next step. If somebody with reason and common sense would say, okay, well, he was a protector, but nothing, only bad stuff came out of this. Right? By the action of eliminating this UnitedHealthcare CEO, absolutely nothing has changed. Healthcare is still astronomically priced. There's still people who are getting denied coverage every single day.
Right.
And, what did it really serve? I'm in that camp.
Right. Like what was the point exactly? And and why him? See, personally, I think that this whole idea in the manifesto, we'll read it from it, I'm sure, but this whole idea of doing this because he was angry at the healthcare world, I'm not so sure that that's the real reason. I'm not sure if if it was unconscious or if there was a secondary motive. But the fact of the matter is that with this type of offender, the real motive is usually something like, I want a lot of attention. I want people to see me as a lionized figure. I'm mad and I'm emoting and I want people to rally around me and pay attention to me. And and unfortunately, the society plays right along with it. They love it. They gobble it up. They give it, and they collude with it. You
Yeah,
saw a little of that with the Koberger situation. You take a pathetic soul and you give them you reward it. You see what I mean? Because I think ultimately that with this type of person, you have to think about the motives of assassins. And this falls into the category of the type of assassin who's really egomaniacal and interested in it. I mean, you see even the way he preens and primps, when he's in court, like as if he's a movie star.
and Gary, don't you think that, if we're going to lump them into a group or a category,
Right.
these guys are losers on their own. They've never accomplished anything. Never mind the fact that Luigi is from an extremely wealthy, prominent Baltimore family.
Right.
These guys haven't accomplished anything in their lives, in their short lives, and they turn to violence as a way. You've talked on the show before about how their name is now in
Right.
infamy and attached to a horrible thing, but yet it's still known. It's like they can't do anything on their own legitimately, so they turn to parasite. I mean, yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like in other words, you cannot look up Abraham Lincoln and read about all the beautiful things that he accomplished without seeing the name of John Wilkes Booth. It is not possible. And so that the idea is that the person has now parasitically attached himself to Lincoln. And there are people who at the time of that assassination would have seen Booth as an attractive, lionized figure for doing something that they thought, like, see, there you go. But you have to remember that ultimately Booth didn't really care about Lincoln. Really, not really. It was a kind of an act of narcissism. I'm sure the audience knows he came from an acting family where he was considered a very attractive guy. He had women swarming around him. There used to be you could get little images of him that were like the equivalent in that day of baseball cards that would get, that you could hang up on the wall of him. And in his family, there was this kind of popular part that was played, which was the part of Brutus in the Caesar, the assassination of Caesar, the Shakespeare play. And he had his father, brother, I think, were famous for playing that role. And he always, I think, felt kind of not good enough compared to them. And the idea was that by killing Lincoln, he was sort of like all of a sudden the American Brutus, killing Julius Caesar. And that, in fact, there's a book about him called The American Brutus for that reason. It was a narcissistic thing that was ultimately about a family drama. And I think that's what you're going to find out here. I think that this is really about what is it that makes this person feel people aren't listening to his needs? That why does he need a justification, for example, of why he wasn't going to bed with women and successful with women? Oh, I have back pain and I can't. What's that really about? Was it an excuse? Was there some interpersonal problem that we don't know about? Was there something he was ashamed of? Was there something in the family dynamic? Who is symbolically this guy really that gets killed? Some rejecting figure that doesn't care about your needs. I don't know. All I know is that ultimately I would be willing to bet that this is the playing out of some smaller drama wrapped up in the disguise of a noble action so that you get the approbation of society. And unfortunately, people will give it to him because, they don't think very critically about things sometimes.
Well, they're getting
Broadway show about him, I heard. Right.
I mean, here's
crazy.
Here's over $1 million.
Oh yeah, look at that.
And I mean, why this guy Why are they doing that?
Doesn't he even have access to millions if he's from that family?
Who
He's
knows?
from
Well,
a
are they
very
giving it to
wealthy family. I mean, I would think they would have the funds to pay for his
But
defense.
he had sort of like stepped away from them and was a little sort of estranged from them for some time, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, for a period of time.
Right. Well, see, that's interesting too. I just think that even though it's going to be painted, a certain way, and people are going to go with they're going to try even the mentally ill thing, although there was extraordinary planning. I mean, in this whole thing, steps to conceal the identity, writings, so forth. I mean, unless, of course, he developed some kind of delusion where he wasn't disorganized, but just developed a kind of grandiose or paranoid delusion. We don't know that. But usually with this, it's about some kind of personality thing and playing out some kind of drama, whether it's conscious or unconscious, that gets you attention and makes you feel you've done something noble, when in fact you're kind of a small, invisible, angry person. And now he's entered the annals of crime forever.
That some of the, I'm getting feedback.
Yeah, we're getting feedback.
It's coming back through your computer.
My computer?
Yeah,
Interesting.
that's okay.
Let me see something. I'm just going to
That's all
lower it. How about now? You getting it now?
Testing 1 2. No, you're okay. It feeds through a loop because you don't have headsets, ears on. But that's okay.
At least I have a head.
No, one of the things that the key pieces of evidence here that the defense is trying to throw out, and the court still hasn't ruled on it. The current timeline currently is January 23rd. There's supposed to be a ruling by the judge because the judge wants to make sure that jury selection begins by September 8th. So this is going to be a very, very busy year coming up here. But what the defense is trying to throw out is not only this evidence here that you see in this picture, but he wants to get rid of the gun. And what he's doing, the defense's argument is that when the police contacted him, the moment they identified him, they, should have gotten a search warrant for all the items in his backpack. But rather than that, they went and they searched through it, which I think that's going to be a very hard argument because they didn't know who they had in totality. And if the defense is successful, though, that is what is called for our audience fruit of the poisonous tree, and which would mean everything in this picture that you see potentially could get squashed by the court, and it would not come in the state's case in chief. So a jury would never see that stuff, and so basically, the defense can pick and choose how they say it, what they say, which I think is fascinating because that, goes into where the defense has set up their own website to talk about their position, which is one of the first times, and Karen and I have talked about this at length. This is one of the first times I've ever seen anything like this. Go ahead.
In addition to the asking for funds and donations for Luigi, that website also encourages people to send him letters in jail. Letters, it's got, if you want to send them a package, here's how to do it. So, Chris, I think it's interesting. Why is the defense gathering letters from afar, the public, the nutty people who find him somebody worthy that they should write in jail? I thought that aspect is fascinating. And, at some point, if this does go to trial, it's got to come out. And it's like, okay, so what's the benefit of 15,000 or 50,000 letters from forlorn, kooks out there?
Well, here's a question for you. Now, I've worked with a lot of people that have delusional conviction about something, and I've worked with a lot of people that have zealous conviction without being psychotic of things. Not that this guy is. I'm just saying if anybody tries to raise that question. So here's the question. If you raised $1 million and you really, really believed, delusionally or zealously, that there were a lot of people out there who were in need of health care and they weren't getting it, what would you do with the $1 million?
Yeah, exactly. You set up a
Give it
fund.
away. You'd give it away to the people,
Yeah,
like, right,
victims.
right. You'd give it away, and you would say, "See, I'm going to make the point that I'm a warrior. I'm a protector for those people." You're not protecting those people; protecting himself. So I think this is a good example of a tree is known by its fruit. Ultimately, this is not someone who appears to be tipping, toward others, ultimately. Now, look, I don't know if anything's being donated. It could be, but I haven't heard that. Have you?
No, they'd be the first to say it if it was. So assume that it's not.
But that's what a zealous person would do. I mean, you'd be like St. Francis, giving away everything, right down to, practically the undergarments. You wouldn't be able to stop because you'd be so obsessed with the idea that you needed to be a warrior for that cause. See, I think that's a point that should be raised. It's inconsistent with the story that's being what it looks more like is a person who is posing as a giver, but ultimately takes care of number one.
Absolutely. And did you know, obviously, the majority of the things in this website were all set up by the attorneys, and even the GoFundMe, the attorneys are listed as the individuals who set it up, not by name, but kind of like a mini trust / hey, by the way. So I don't think Luigi's going to see a penny of this, nor if there was ever a disposition, I don't think the family will ever see a penny of this. The two surviving boys, his ex-wife, or anybody who are actually the victims. But I do believe that the attorneys will peel off this $1 million rather carefully. What do you think, Karen?
Yeah, without a doubt, definitely. I think one of the really interesting things about this case as well is whether or not they're going to seek the death penalty. And that is still up in the air. So if I can, I just want to go back to Friday's hearing. And by the way, this is going on in federal court. There is also a state case against him as well. And we'll talk about a little bit about that as well. But on Friday, the U.S. District Judge, Margaret Garrett, she set the trial to begin on September 8th. That's when jury selection is supposed to start. And, so she said that the rest of the trial schedule, including opening statements and testimony, is contingent on whether she allows prosecutors to seek the death penalty. Again, this isn't the federal case, the federal side. And that's one of the major issues that's still hanging out there. So if the death penalty is in play, if she allows it in, the next phase of the trial will begin January 11th, 2027. So it's like about a year from now. And that's actually 4 months after jury selection starts. So that gap is kind of interesting. Obviously, if it's a capital case, attorneys on both sides need more time to prep. We know that. If there's no death penalty, then opening statements will begin October 13th of this year. And then on Friday's hearing, the judge listened to a lot of procedural things governing police seizure regarding the backpack and the items that we just previously talked about after Luigi Mangione was arrested December 9th of 2024. Now, one thing that I thought was really interesting is that obviously Luigi's defense attorneys are saying that the charges enabling prosecutors to seek capital punishment, the death penalty, are technically flawed. This is their argument. They said that the government was prejudicial towards their client, towards Luigi, by publicly declaring their intent to seek the death penalty before getting an indictment. And when I read that, all I could think about was the Charlie Kirk case going on in Utah. And I talked to Chris about this too. So just as a side note, again, I thought this was pretty interesting. You guys remember that the day after Charlie Kirk was murdered, the Utah governor came out and said that, and again, this was before Tyler Robinson was arrested in that case, that the state would seek the death penalty. I mean, that's pretty unusual even before they made an
it's
arrest
crazy.
in the case. And that's actually going to be potentially the detriment of the prosecution. So once Tyler Robinson was arrested, if you remember the sequence, the shooting happened on a Wednesday. The governor came out on Thursday. Friday, Tyler Robinson was arrested. And then Governor Cox in Utah said that the state was preparing to pursue the death penalty if it goes to trial. Now, right now, that's still a question. I mean, they're seeking it, but they haven't taken it off the table.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that, and Gary, what do you think? I mean, we've noticed a real shift in these high profile cases where the politicians are getting in front of the microphone and making these outlandish comments, sometimes statements, and even the director of the FBI, I mean, Kash Patel, sometimes, they put the, what's the old saying,
Cart before the horse.
yeah, exactly. And so now in our time, right? I mean, there were separations of, the law enforcement entity, and then you had the political, whatever they do. Politicians change, right? With every election, but
Right.
law enforcement does not. I mean, they have a straight and narrow. It's the Constitution of the United States. It's the state constitutions wherever these individuals are serving. And when these politicians get involved, and we're seeing it right now, quite frankly, in Minneapolis with what's going on there with some of the issues that are taking place. But that's for another story too. However, the driving force there seems to be these politicians. And what's fascinating in this one, even in Tyler Robinson, is the defense right now is arguing in Tyler Robinson that the prosecutor had a daughter at the event.
Right. Who witnessed right. I heard that.
Now, wait till they start weighing in on the governor saying we're seeking the death penalty. And he's not even the law enforcement officer for the state. The AG is. And the AG didn't say that. The governor did. And wait till the defense grabs that piece of the puzzle and starts stuffing it back down the throats of the American public.
Right. Well, one of the things that bothers me about these various stories is that if the offender is partially, even I don't even know if it's conscious, is partially motivated by the desire for the public to kind of hoist them on their shoulders and see them as a hero, or to be, to stand for a cause or whatever, then the whole idea is that by definition, the offense is designed to draw an enormous public reaction. And then in the defense, they try to say something like, you can't get a fair trial because too many people are talking about it. Somebody was at the event. Well, of course, everybody and their mother was at the event that was in that town. It was a major thing, that kind of thing. It's like so you sort of have it both ways, right? Like, in other words, you get your wish that you become a very public figure, and then you try to cry foul that as a result of that, you can't get a fair trial.
Yeah,
it's sort of interesting how that works.
Right.
Because you're always a victim, right? No matter how.
The Koberger case too. Remember, they put the survey out, the public survey, and then they said, "Well, there, too many people know about this case. We have to move it." And
you wanted attention, you got attention. Now you don't want attention.
Well, and this is
advantage, right?
And Luigi, look, they have a whole series of questions. Where is Luigi in custody? Can I send him an email? Are there any restrictions to his email? This is from his defense team, who is going to argue, Your Honor, there's no way this guy can get a fair trial in the city of New York because he's got too much publicity. But meanwhile, they put a Q&A FAQ page out on a website that says, hey, if you want to talk to our guy, feel free, make it happen. And then they'll argue that the jury pool was contaminated. Meanwhile, they're contaminating the jury pool about having conversations with their clients.
Right. It's as if and I don't know if that's what's going on here, but it's as if sometimes the need to feed the narcissistic beast of the offender is at odds with the narcissistic person's need to externalize blame for everything. So if you have a narcissistic core, you're simultaneously saying, I didn't do anything wrong, it's everybody else's fault, I did it because of you made me do it. And you're saying, give me attention, feed me. And you put those two things together and you wind up with this ridiculous contradictory pattern. But those are both classic signs of narcissistic people. See?
So let's
think about it that way.
So let's have a shift here just for a moment.
Oh, boy,
tell us about Ted, and give us a high, 30,000 foot run on his manifesto, or what was going on in his mind at the time.
Well, Ted Kaczynski was a undeniably brilliant individual. His IQ was pretty much as high as it can get. He, was a professor and was probably dealing with some kind of what used to be called paranoid schizophrenia, where a person can have delusional ideas, voices, so forth, but can be emotionally intact and fairly high functioning despite it. And he became caught up in ideas about the environment and the need to kind of radically alter the way that people were living, and the whole idea of capitalism feeding that beast, and felt that the best way to go about it was to sort of frighten people into being aware of it by creating these unbelievably meticulous bombs, and sending them to random people who would open up a package and have it explode, and very, very cruel. And he was, consistent, I think, with the schizophrenic presentation. He went and sort of lived this isolated lifestyle, kind of living off the land in the woods and so forth. And in fact, if you read Mindhunter by John Douglas, who, of course, is one of the people who helped to found the Cold Case Foundation that Chris and I are in, and most of you know him, even from the show Mindhunter, or from his many books. John Douglas talked about, how a profile was put together to help to catch him. And one of the things that was very interesting about the profiles, they started to notice that the fake names that he would put on the return addresses of these exploding packages were all references to wood. And that helped them to start to think, maybe this guy's got some kind of preoccupation with the woods or the environment or something, which it turned out to be true. But it was ultimately Kaczynski's brother who said, that sounds an awful lot like Ted, and kind of came forward. And, Ted Kaczynski is one of those people who, he ultimately took his life in prison, the ultimate act of control. But he is one of those people that there was this sort of odd group of people in the world who kind of looked up to him and saw him as somebody who almost saw himself as part of like a military effort to stand up for something that was unjust. And he, if he had a historical analog, I think it would be John Brown, who was the probably disturbed man that was seen as the bellwether of the American Civil War. You probably remember John Brown, that John Brown had this idea that he was going to start a race war and arm blacks against their masters, slave masters. And he and his son led the kind of mutilation, like a mass murder, basically. And half of the country saw him as a hero, and half of the country saw him as a villain. I believe John Wilkes Booth was present at the execution of John Brown. John Brown was called, if I remember correctly, by Walt Whitman. I think it was Walt Whitman, the meteor of the war, because when he stood up in a church and put his hand up and said that he felt that slavery would be settled only by blood, he was seen as like a kind of prophet that signaled that a break was coming in the philosophy of the country. Well, in a strange way, some of these guys, I think, see themselves that way. that they want to be that kind of figure that says, like, this can't go on anymore, or somebody has to be the one who leads the charge, that kind of thing. And it's just a classic example of how it's a matter of, I mean, look, I don't agree with the perspective of these people are heroes, but there are some people who do. And it gets into this whole philosophical question. And this is why I think politicians jump into the fray, because you can take a figure in one half of the country and see them as a martyr to a cause that the other part of the country sees as an enemy that was eliminated. And so you're seeing this kind of cold civil war that's playing out, right? It's not, fortunately, an open one with fire, but you're seeing this cold philosophical civil war that plays out. And all these figures, if there ever were, God forbid, a second civil war in this country, a lot of these figures would suddenly pop up in the history as little signs that those breaks were coming, because they caused these fragments in the philosophy of the time and stood for different sides. And so it's a very, very interesting thing to think about. There's a famous story told that during the American Civil War, I think it was the Battle of Vicksburg, but I can't be sure, there was an aurora borealis that went over the battlefield, and both sides saw it as a sign that God was blessing them as being righteous. One of them had to be wrong.
No, that's a fascinating description.
Somebody was wrong.
Here, one of the things I think when you were on before, Gary, and we talked about this, and Karen,
yeah,
I was really concerned that the type of fan base that developed over this execution on video in public, and now that has manifested itself in a financial support, $1.4 million, and so what was going to be the next one, right? And then now we have we had the shots at the president, we had the Charlie Kirk thing, we now have all of this stuff going down in Minnesota,
right?
And it's almost like to your point, what you just said, it's almost like this, rainbow over the horizon, and everybody goes, see, we're doing the right thing. And
that's the diabolical confusion of the time we're living in, is that
right.
Each side thinking they're right.
Yes. And this is, I think we are in very precarious times in this country. I really believe that. I mean, if you just, no matter what the algorithm catches, it's going to feed you what, you think, or what it thinks you want to see. And that's all going to be just a continual loop of negativity.
And then it's like an echo chamber. But, Chris, in my own private kind of reflection on it, and in my, in my spiritual beliefs, and as somebody who wrote, co-wrote The New Evil, which is about some of these changes, the conclusion I've drawn is that from a theological perspective, what's valuable about the time we're living in is it proves that there's a philosophical error in the past, let's say 50 to 60 years, which is that the reality is there is a right and a wrong. And I think that the problem with the postmodern way of thinking is anything goes. There is no right and wrong. It's all constructed. And so what happens is when you have a situation like this, it takes that to its logical end. Well, if there is no clear right and wrong, then everybody's right. Everybody could think they're right, even in a diametrically opposed moral puzzle. And of course, the conclusion we're going to have to come to is that some people come to is, well, then I guess might makes right, or it's all about like caveman power or something like that. It shouldn't be. Ultimately, there are some things that are wrong and some things that are right. And I think that's what we've forgotten. We've forgotten that there's a morality to all of this stuff. These questions, I mean, from a spiritual perspective, we have the answers to what the right moves are in each of these stories. It's right there in all the ancient books. So, so that are unfortunately for some people collecting dust. So I think that's the sadness of it, Chris, is that we have gotten to the point where now truth is just a murky blob. And so you go into a courtroom and you say, yeah, all right, DNA says this, but how do you know the test isn't wrong? How do you know? How do you know really? How do you know? And you toy with the truth, and then you've got your OJs walking free.
Well, which leads me back into, I'm a history buff like you.
Yeah.
I'm
So
a
you know what I'm talking about.
World War II history buff.
Oh, yeah.
And I see some of the overlap from 1933 to 1939 occurring right now. And obviously after the war, when people were walking around, and they see the things happening in the smokestacks and that kind of stuff. And how did they get to that point? And then I see what's happening today, even today, this Sunday afternoon. Okay. You have a governor in a state who says, keep it up, folks. You have law enforcement officers being threatened with guns in their hands, meaning people coming at these guys and gals with guns, whether or not you agree with the issue or not. Rule number one, don't bring a gun to a group of law enforcement officials when they're gathering, especially federal law enforcement. And then you have a politician who chimes in and says, keep it up. And that happened today with the president, Obama. He tweeted out what's happening. No, I'm just saying, he tweeted out what's happening in Minnesota is wrong.
But if we pull back to 30,000 foot view, which is necessary, as I've always said, politicians are going to come and go. It's the people and the relationships is what we're left with, regardless of what's going on at the top. And I think that with a lot of this stuff, and I want to keep you guys, I don't want to take this to a different place, but, Gary, I think it's really interesting. So, none of this is new under the sun.
Oh, no.
And I think everybody would agree that social media and where we are with technology, it's just brought it all. We carry it around 24/7. It's not like the old days where you read the newspaper, you put it down 30 years ago, you go on with your business, whatever. So all of these things, and just kind of going back to true crime, it's right there for us all day, 24/7, unless people have a lot of internal control, self-control to kind of monitor themselves, which a lot of us don't, a lot of them don't. And I think there's this over magnification because we have our cell phones and it's, all day, all night on, whatever social media platform you're watching.
So it's a good point. And it's dangerous because when your brain is accustomed to receiving information in little sound bites, you make decisions and interpretations in a leap. Instead of waiting until all the information is available and thinking critically, you have an immediate reaction. If this paper said it and editorialized it, it's true. That kind of thing. Now, I have to say, what's complicated about these stories is that they get painted as if they're black and white. One side is white, one side's black, and the other one says, no, you're black and I'm white. The reality is that probably what's really going on is that everybody is a little bit right and a little bit wrong. There's probably human beings that are all sort of confused. They all, like, in other words, you could have 100 people who have a belief system and they all have different beliefs about that belief system. They don't all agree 100% about every act. We know this. Anyone who's ever been in a church, for example, knows that you'll have the guy sitting next to you probably doesn't believe all the dogma the same way you do, or has questions about it, or has his own interpretation. In other words, everybody kind of mixes up their values, and then they're all people who have their own psychology and their own whatever. And so I think the better way to think about it is just that it's just a bunch of human beings that are all confused and they're falling into these different buckets, but nobody is flawless. They've all got philosophical problems in what they think. If the good Lord came down today, he would say, you're a little wrong and you're a little wrong. Now sit down and get along. Your brothers and sisters eat, eat together already. But I think that the reality is that it is that we try to make it seem as if any of them has a kind of moral monopoly. And that's where it gets complicated. And Chris has said this many times, is that, the idea that we've divided the country up into two colors is so ridiculous, so silly. But it gets right to your point, Karen, about the simplification of critical thought. And the internet, and especially our phones, have added to that. They've created a dopamine drenched, impulsive, attention deficit riddled culture where we, not all attention deficits happen for that reason, but we've all developed that kind of quality. And you don't sit and go, wait, just because you're saying it doesn't mean it's true. Let me think about that a minute. See, and it's very, very scary. And I think if there really is an evil in the world, it couldn't be doing a better job, because it comes masquerading as righteousness, or it comes masquerading as intelligence, and it can make people make fools of themselves spiritually.
Well,
you know what I'm saying. So that's what's so that's the confusion is the evil of it.
That's a fascinating point, because with the manifesto from Luigi, one of the, just some core excerpts for an example.
Yeah. It's a piece of work. Let me tell you. I wonder if they're even going to read it in court.
Well, but you see, he took a political / cultural position in this manifesto.
Yeah.
And which, kind of told me, just to your point right there, right, that there's wolves in sheep's clothing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
On every side of every story, always.
Every story. And that's what's alarming about what's happening minute by minute, because, like, to your point, we think in bits and bytes.
Yes.
We're not critically thinking through this stuff that, hey, you get both sides of the argument. Well, that guy shouldn't have had a gun. Well, it's an open carry state. Well, he didn't brandish it. Well, yeah, but he pulled it out. It's like this and this and this.
Right.
Okay. But they miss the other side of that point, is these law enforcement officers, you see gun, and immediately it's like gun. Okay. And your training kicks in, that you're not thinking about what that person may be thinking, other than that person has a gun. And let me tell you, I've been involved in 3 officer involved shootings. I had a guy shoot at me 7 times one night. It hit the dumpster it was a big, huge dumpster.
Scary.
And by the way, he had raped a 14-year-old girl, and she was running down the alley, and he was chasing her. And my partner and I, a guy named Paul LaCroix and Eddie Morton, we were walking. We just happened to be in the area. Long story short, she's running at us, and I hear a boom, 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 and she falls right next to us. And I turned around, I was like, holy crap. And I see the muzzle flash. Okay. He just killed this girl. And I grabbed Paul and pulled him behind this dumpster. Okay. And then you hear boom, ping, boom, ping, boom, ping. And now he's shooting at us. Okay. Now, here's the point. Okay. It was over in 11 seconds. The whole thing.
No time, critical thought. You're just kind of, it goes animal. You get animal in the moment. Yeah.
11 seconds. You had to respond. Okay. And that's the danger of when you have this cultural position, instead of, whatever happened to God doesn't see in color. I wrote a song about that. It's actually called God Doesn't See in Color. Karen knows. And in his manifesto, he says, quote, "These parasites had it coming," referring to healthcare companies profiting from suffering. Quote, "It had to be done." Okay. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone, insisting he acted alone.
Now, was that noble, or was it an emphasis of that he was amazing enough to do it solo?
Great question, Gary. What say you? I mean,
That's the $1,000,000 question. Is the motive that he was really caught up in this stuff and angry about it and sort of lost it, snapped? Or is it that that whole thing is just a guise for a craving of some kind of attention? And you're mad that the, you know, parentified, insurance company doesn't pay any attention to and give you what you want, that kind of thing. So they've got to pay. And now you get attention from other people. In other words, it's unclear, but I'm saying based on other people of this ilk, there does tend to be a kind of personality-based motive. And when you take a sentence like that, you look at it from different angles, you could see it both ways. Because you could also interpret that as, I did it all by myself. I didn't need anyone. Because if the essence of it is someone's not taking care of me, then you'd want to prove that you could operate alone. I didn't need anybody. See? So that it's sort of pathetic, from that angle. So it all depends on how you see it. But I think that and as Debbie, who I know is in the audience, is saying, maybe it's both. Well, sometimes things are both. By the way, there was a question in the audience I thought was sweet from Lori. She said, Karen, she wants to know, Karen, how did you sleep at night all those nights that Chris was out and you didn't know if he was going to come home because people were firing at him and threatening? That's an interesting question. And think about the wife of this poor man who died.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it's always two things. You're proud of your spouse's career and honor, but
Yeah.
the human condition worries. I tend to be a worrier more than not be a worrier. So
Well, Chris is pretty irreplaceable, so he's got to be okay,
yeah.
Well, she's number one. I mean, she got a couple of phone calls. There were times where, things were pretty hairy and the phone would ring. And
Sure.
that was a great question.
That was a great question.
It's a
there's, millions of, I would, if any spouse of anybody serving as a first responder, any military spouses, I mean, that question is for really everybody.
Or the children of parents who do that kind of thing for a living. I mean, I've had people talk to me for years about the almost PTSD-like anxiety that every time you see your parent, you think maybe this is the last time I'm going to see them, because they're out dealing with people who are shooting at them or and so forth. And sometimes it happens. That also happens a lot of times with kids of firefighters.
Yeah.
It's it's rough. I have some cousins whose where a cousin of mine was a very heroic firefighter, died after a major blaze, had been a hero of 9/11 and so forth. And it's hard. Nobody's ever the same afterward. But I think it is a nice moment to kind of pause and think about the heroism of people like that. And because even if mixed in a bunch of, let's say, police officers, you have somebody, let's say, who's unwell or a little too wild or does something wrong or whatever. What the media does is it takes the entire assortment of these good people and sticks them into one basket. And then it's like putting a target on their back. It's a dangerous, dangerous thing. And I think, it's sad. I can't get over that. I mean, I've heard stories here in New York you wouldn't believe of things people do to police officers just because of what they stand for. It's unbelievable, spitting, throwing things, insulting. So I think it is important to kind of go like, these are human beings, and most of them, they're just doing their job, and they've committed to doing a job where they're helping people. You know what I mean? But so you know what I mean, Chris, you've dealt with it. Have you ever dealt with anti-law enforcement hatred?
Oh yeah, he's got plenty of stories on that. It's funny. It's not funny, but he kind of puts a funny spin on it. If you notice the stories that Chris will share from Life on the Beat, They are, I mean, they're harrowing and you're like, oh my gosh, but I don't know. They're not depressing. Although
No.
the one about the guy, the person who was purposely stood in front of the train and then he was dealing with the mom of that.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Well, that one's heartbreaking, but I don't know,
I
he
put
just
that
has
kid in 43 bags.
he just has a way of he's got a way of humanizing the stories and making them
Right.
probably not as scary as they may have been in the moment. I'm not saying he's not accurately sharing what was going on, but he kind of he's sort of remembered the funny ones or the crazy ones or the ones that are not as horrible. But then again, I can think about the deaf mute story is really horrible as well.
They're very powerful stories, and I always think about the line from Scripture: "No greater love hath any man than this, to lay down his life for a friend." What happens when you have a person whose entire job is dedicated to going out every day with the possibility of doing that? It becomes easy to miss it. It's like, we don't all go out every day and go, boy, am I grateful for the sun coming up. But if it didn't come up, we'd be in a lot of trouble. You take it for granted. I mean, how many of us wake up in the morning and go sit out and look at the sun and go, boy, I'm grateful that came up today, or I'd be freezing to death. So at some point, you just get numb to it that these people are waking up, going to work, doing their thing, coming home, having dinner, watching a little TV, going to bed, waking up, doing it again. And every day there's the possibility they're going to lay their lives on the altar of helping people. And there is a kind of holiness to that. I mean, that's the whole thing. And there are a lot of jobs like that, and no one ever thinks about it. People who save lives for a living. I think about it sometimes even that my job is to help people through emotional darkness for a living. And, it's another one of those kinds of jobs. And, but Chris, there's a kind of spirituality to it. Remember when Vernon Gaybreth used to say, we work for God?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a spirituality to it.
And there's this idea of, when I started on the street, remember all my field training officers were from the 70s, the 60s and the 70s. They were already 20 years into careers when I started in 1982. And during the 80s and through the 90s, early 2000s, I mean, it was a very, very difficult time in this country. New York City in the 80s was
a mess.
It was a mess.
It was a very scary place.
And California, Southern California, I went to the LA riots. I spent 4 days in the LA riots, all kinds of things, that was happening down there. And, this question or this comment right here is exactly what everybody was saying to us. If they're trained to de-escalate, then why aren't they doing it? That's exactly the attitude. Every cop, when you would put your uniform on, you knew you were going to get that attitude on the street. You knew it.
Yeah, but Chris, the problem, and Caroline is a wonderful person.
Of course, I'm not saying it's her.
No, I'm just saying I know who she is. She's terrific, and I know how she means the question. And the thing, the interesting thing about the question is the word "they," as if "they" is every single person in a uniform. Right. It should say some of them. See, that's the whole problem. Is that we think in absolutes. We think in absolutes. I mean, those who are Star Wars fans will remember only a Sith thinks in absolutes. In other words, the absolutism is a hallmark of a kind of a darkness that is not reality. Nothing is 100%. And I think it's better to say you can have a group of people who are well-meaning, and sprinkled in there are going to be a few people who maybe go overboard. And even the police departments know that, of course. Well, I mean, you never knew a cop that had a few men.
I had cops arrested.
That's what I'm saying, right? I mean,
and also just for the record, I think I come to this conversation with authenticity because
absolutely,
I worked on the border.
Oh, did you? I didn't know that.
Well, San Diego, County.
Oh, you like you mean was it Tijuana?
No, well, no. We were dealing with people who were killing people and fleeing to Mexico 32 miles away from our city. Okay. I mean, it's Oceanside is in Southern California. And in the 80s and the 90s, we were the most violent city per capita in the United States of America. And let me give you some context. Okay, real fast. In 1995, for an example, I have a plaque back there. Okay. In 1995, for an example, the city of San Diego had 1.5 million people approximately. I believe that year they had 50 homicides out of 1.5 million people. Oceanside
Wow.
had 30 with 175,000 people, counting 50,000 Marines out of Camp Pendleton. Now you do the math. 1/10 of the people, almost as many homicides. And why was that? Because when you got north, 32 miles from the San Ysidro border, you hit Oceanside. And anybody that knows Southern California knows what I'm talking about.
Right.
Between Oceanside and San Clemente is a United States Border Patrol checkpoint. Every crook fleeing from Mexico and every crook fleeing from Los Angeles, Orange County, Westminster, keep going, right? LA, stopped in Oceanside to see if that checkpoint was operational. There was one off of the 15 in Temecula, and there was one off of the Interstate 5 in Oceanside. It's opened again, by the way. I can't tell you how many criminals we arrested who were criminals, hardcore gangbangers, cartel members. I mean, we were working with the Arellano brothers and the cocaine cowboys in the early 80s. I went to the DEA School of Narcotics Investigators in 1985. And that was right after a DEA agent by the name of Kiki Camarino got murdered, and he was tortured and executed by the cartels. A lot of the cartel members, and by the way, you may remember this, they killed a Catholic, was he a cardinal?
Yeah, in Tijuana.
In TJ. Okay. 3 of those gang members came from Oceanside. 2 of them came from San Diego, 16th Street.
Yeah, there was in the 80s and 90s, especially, and probably still today, there's a lot of bleed over on that border of San Diego and Mexico. And what Chris is saying is that he had a number of cases. He's talked about a murder case where the suspect was a Mexican national, was in San Diego County working. That's the, is that the El Torito murder?
El Torito.
And he ended up fleeing back to Mexico. It's a unbelievable story. And then he actually turned himself in for the murder rap in San Diego. Okay, so just to give people an understanding, it would be like working on in Pullman, Washington, almost, although the difference is a little further, and having things spill over to Moscow, Idaho. Instead of state to state, it was California to Mexico. So that's his point.
So when you think about what's happening today and what happened then, there's not a lot of change at all. The politicians have done nothing, zero. Okay, we used to see these poor migrants. And by the way, I can't tell you how many migrant homicides I worked out in the fields, in the strawberry fields. Okay, where they would just shoot each other, and then everybody would disappear, like everybody, but a dead body. Okay. And I could tell,
those never get solved.
They don't.
Nobody ever talks. There's no information on those.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
And long story short, the issues today now, when the dynamic of social media came in, and then we start talking about Luigi, okay, and we start seeing the shifting into almost this idea of, well, maybe violence isn't such a bad idea. Okay. And I'm really concerned with the fabric of what is right and what is wrong. And, I used to get beat up all the time on Twitter. And finally I just said, forget it. And I block all my tweets because, people they've lost their minds. Some of them, not all of them, but I mean, I'm a straight shooter. I mean, Karen will tell you, if you want to know what's on my mind, ask me, because I'm going to tell you. And now, is that good or bad? I don't know. Okay. I can tell you this.
It can be both.
Right. But
keeping with the theme from earlier in this discussion.
Right. But
Two things can be possible at the same time.
But at the same time, I have a moral compass that says, you know what? I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not here to hurt you, whether I disagree or agree, or you disagree or agree with me. I'm not here to hurt you. We're going to be the same color blood when it's all over. Okay. And by the way, good. I think the other piece of this puzzle, and we forgot. I went to church today, and this guy, it's an older gentleman. He goes, he says, this is the waiting room. And I said, the waiting room? He goes, yeah, we're all just waiting to get to heaven here. And I thought, wow, that is really profound, because isn't that what we're really doing? And what is de-escalation, right? What is de-escalation? Okay. They call it verbal judo. Is there anything I can say or do to help you understand, Mr. Jones? I do not want to pull you out of that car. Do you understand that? Well, officer, I pay your salary. Yes, I appreciate that. And now let's get back to the question. Is there anything I can say or do to help you get out of that car? You're impeding an investigation right now. I do not want to take you to jail. But if you continue with the behavior that you have, and you continue to go down this path, you are putting me in a no-win situation. Okay? That's de-escalation, the power to say to people, stop doing that. But you know what you see today? You see this. People doing this in front of you, bumping people, pushing people. Hey, don't talk to that guy. This guy is a red color, and this guy's a blue color. Nobody talks here, okay? It's law enforcement's job to stand in between the reds and the blues and let them argue with each other all day long, okay? But you cannot have a community of hundreds of people on Signal, in chat rooms, following federal law enforcement officers around, ramming them with your cars, okay, and not expect ultimately a response, because that is escalation, and that is not de-escalation. And when one of these officers is murdered by one of the criminals that he or she is trying to apprehend, are we going to applaud and open GoFundMe pages for the murderer? Or are we going to say we're lost because of the parasites had it coming? I'm worried right now in the political environment, and I'm not talking politics, meaning in law enforcement environments, people like Luigi. There are hundreds of Luigis out there today, Gary, on the street. Would you agree?
Well, I mean, there are certainly a lot of people that feel righteous in their fury because they feel that disempowered by the mechanisms around them. But I think that on a larger more philosophical kind of plane, what this conversation is really about is this. I think that for some reason that is not completely clear, human beings have an instinct or a need for some kind of a I don't want to use the word religion, but some kind of thing that tells them like this is what is right and this is what is wrong. And what happens is if you take, and I'm not necessarily saying whether they're true or not, that's a matter of belief. But if you take the philosophy and religion out of the society, all people are going to do is turn something else into a religion. And so what has happened is we've turned cultural issues and politics into our faith, into our religion, so that now we protect them as zealously as we would protect our faith. And they've become intermingled. And so what you're really seeing is the equivalent of like a spiritual kind of quagmire where everyone sort of thinks they're right. And that's what makes it so hard is that I think it, and then there are some people who have turned the need for that kind of religion into making themselves into the God. And what's fascinating about people like that is they don't see the irony, for example, that they're on social media and they say, I have this many followers. Followers? Are you the Pope? I mean, do you have a special mitre on your head? Followers? Like, you're an influencer? You're a creator? Creator? That's another word we use for God. So it's a fascinating thing that it's totally unconscious, but it's a kind of a need for filling that void, whatever that is. And that is what is so disturbing about it is that if there is such a thing as evil, it couldn't be doing a better job. It's a fantastic job of getting everybody very, very, very confused. But of course, because evil in the end must always win, what'll eventually happen is it'll make some people say, wait a minute, I want to just return to a place where I had a clear picture of what was right and wrong, because this just doesn't feel right. Maybe I'm too much of an optimist about these things, but I think that in the final analysis, what we're seeing right now is the world being divided up into the sheep and goats, and that some people ultimately hear clearly the voice of the shepherd, and they know that in the end, if something is right, if in the process you're feeding the hungry and you're giving drink to the thirsty and you're clothing the naked and you're welcoming the visitor in other words, you got to look for who is doing the loving. Otherwise, but then you get into the question of, well, then what is loving? Isn't protecting people loving? See, so that's the thing. You got to look for those signs. Wouldn't you say, Chris? That's what's lost. This is that we forgot that we're brothers and sisters.
Well,
it's completely lost that every one of these people shares our DNA.
We've allowed ourselves to be divided into
exactly
whatever color. You're one color, I'm this color. You think that way, I think this way. We've allowed it to happen
because we're scared.
Yeah, and I think
that's what makes it happen. Fear.
Absolutely, fear is huge. And not to throw a wrench into this, but I want to ask you, Gary.
I hope you agree with what I'm saying. I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying, and I always feel like, because I always go back to, okay, in true crime, what is going on here? What is going on in the culture? What is going on in our society? And 100% of these crimes, in my mind, come back to the rise of narcissism.
Definitely.
I mean, obviously, we take selfies all the time. Okay. The technology, our phones have made it so easy. But again, taking this back to true crime, would you say, and tell me if I'm wrong, that again, all of these crimes, and especially this, it seems like it's a large number of spouse killing spouse.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe it's not. Maybe these are just maybe this has gone on since the dawn of time, and we get news on our phone 24/7, so we're hearing more about it. But it seems like murder has become an option on the table. There's a rise of narcissism, and all this is translating to when we collectively are killing each other at either a higher rate or more frequently, or the familicide, am I wrong in thinking there's a rise in this? And again, if you couple that with kicking God out of the public square, right, and all that, of course we are where we are.
Well, what you're picking up on is a point that's right at the heart of what Michael Stone and I talked about in Evil. Our whole point was that the baseline personality structure of the average person is changing to be slightly more narcissistic and disinhibited. And that we believe that it has something to do with the culture. And the reality is that if you give people a permission structure to just vent and emote and to be afraid, to act on fear, to take no crap, that kind of thing, you wind up with much more animal behavior than really human behavior. The very thing that is supposed to separate us from the beasts, so to speak, is that we have this kind of frontal lobe that's supposed to be a braking system on these things. And much of what gives the power to that part of our mind is societal. Is society saying, don't do that, that's wrong. If you for example, I was on the subway a few weeks ago, and this man came on the subway and he was saying something very, very, first very sexual and then very nasty to a woman who rejected him. And the other people on the train said, don't say that, dude. Don't say that. That's disgusting. What'd she do to you? And then he stopped because he was ashamed of himself that he was saying it. And then he got off the train. But he stopped because, in other words, if enough people around you sort of say, like, we don't approve of this, it's sort of, you should have a shame mechanism. Problem is, if you're a psychopath, you're not going to have a shame mechanism. But most people would have a shame mechanism. And if the people around you are saying, do it, pop him in the face, kill him, then you feel that you have a permission structure to do it. And I think you saw a lot of that in the Nazi Germany kind of story that you talked about, Chris, where the average person could get pulled into, this kind of groupthink in a very, very dangerous way. And I think I have always chosen, and I think this is, true of you guys too, has always chosen to not really care very much about other people's pressures on me, because I just act out of what I personally think is right. So I like to think of myself as the person who will stand up in the room and say, what you're doing is wrong, even if you don't like me for saying it, that kind of thing. But I think a lot of people are afraid, and when they are afraid, their impulses override that braking system. Another thing that is playing a very huge role is the growing availability of substances that are disinhibiting people. And that is why I am not a fan of legalization. For example, the growing movement of legalization of drugs, because it has a disinhibiting effect on people, and that's problematic too. Chris, wouldn't you agree?
Well, yeah. I mean, when marijuana went legal, they had to replace all of the canines in Denver,
Right,
because all the dogs were trained to smell marijuana, and they had to scrap all. I think they had like 16 dogs that nobody anticipated. They went, oh crap, what are we going to do with the police dogs that are trained to find marijuana when it went legal? So they lost all those dogs.
Oh, interesting. But it, look, the reality is that the vast majority of
it's now legal in almost
right
every state.
But that's the point.
Well, not
right?
every state.
And if you look up at what's going on, to your point, look at Kensington, Pennsylvania. I mean, that looks like zombie land.
Well, look, the vast majority of people who smoke, I mean, now you're talking about marijuana in particular, but I think harder drugs are far more proper, but the reality is, I mean, alcohol, for example, the association with aggression when people use it in an abusive way is pretty remarkable, not to mention drunk driving and other risks of it. But the reality is that with marijuana, most people are just going to get stupid and dopey and eat funny things, that kind of thing. But like 1 in 10,000 people can become psychotic with marijuana,
Yeah.
right? And for some people, it has a disinhibitory effect. When Rocky Gerges and I did the Columbia Mass Murder Database, we found that one of the best predictors of committing a mass murder was the use of drugs. It sort of reduces the inhibitions of the brain. And so I'm very worried about that. And I think that all of these things, like you talk about, Karen, the immediatization of everything, making everything fast and quick, and all this dopamine, it's having an effect on the structures of the brain and the inhibitory centers of the brain. Because if you're used to getting things immediately, you will not be particularly good at sitting still and waiting and putting things off. And the problem is that in order to think critically, you have to have the patience to do that. You have to have the ability to say, let me wait until I have all the info before I react. And instead, what you're saying is a popping. You get a piece of information, you emote, you go out instantly, and that's very problematic. And it's taking on a kind of a societal, almost like pandemic quality.
Well, there's two sides to it. There's two sides to it, if I may.
Please.
The first side is the addiction problems, right?
That's another story. Yeah.
Okay.
And creating a fortune and problems too, economically.
Well, and that's the second side where I was going here.
Right.
The second side is there's actual economical incentives to the healthcare industry, the provider of the needles, the provider of the Band-Aids,
right,
the provider of the methadone. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Back in the 70s, remember, it was just the juice program. They used to call it the juice program,
right,
where you got your juice card. If you are a heroin addict, methadone stays in your system 24 hours, whereas heroin, every 4 to 6 hours, you need to fix. And you need to, they used to call it chasing the needle. And you get your juice, and then they'd put them in a program. They'd say, hey, you no longer are going to use, street heroin. We're going to give you synthetic heroin in the form of methadone, which came off of World War II.
Right.
Okay. And in the late 90s, when oxycodone hit the streets, remember in Florida, they had all of these doctors writing these prescriptions for for oxycodone. Okay. Well, simultaneously behind the curtain, the drug pharmaceutical companies were allowed to put methadone in 2, 5, and 10 milligram tablets on the street. And there was a mass ODing on methadone because methadone was so powerful in the early or late 90s, early 2000s. Okay. And then that just kept multiplying itself. And today with fentanyl.
That's another animal. Dark, terrible animal.
Okay, but here's the point where I'm going. We went from Nancy Reagan saying, just say no to drugs, to the war on drugs with the cartels and the cocaine cowboys and, the Arianos and all those guys. Okay. To today. Okay. We're blowing ships up or boats up in the middle of the ocean, bringing all this fentanyl. And now here's the other side. In Washington, in Seattle, for an example, the politicians have said, let's let them use heroin. In fact, let's create places where they can go safely, and we'll give them clean needles. We'll give them all their kits, and they can go in and they can shoot up. And that will be safe for them. In Portland, same thing. In San Francisco, same thing. In Maine, Portland, Maine, same thing. In Boston, same thing. In Houston, same thing. Okay. Now, I think there's a responsibility to the addict, because what we are doing is no longer is that person looked at as a human being. Why do I
And it's a medical condition.
why do I say that?
Yeah.
Kensington.
Oh.
If you want to see the result of legalizing drugs, go to Skid Row in Los Angeles or 6th Avenue in LA, which is right down the street from Parker Center, by the way. Okay. And try to get from Skid Row to Parker Center without getting robbed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you something, Chris.
Yep.
Mangione, the whole story is supposedly that he's got back problems. You know, I never heard of him actually putting in a claim and getting rejected. Did you? But my understanding was that, you know, he's got a beef because, okay. Well, was he taking any kind of medicine that people were giving him, over the counter, pills, anything? Was he disinhibited by drugs? I mean, we don't know. It's one of the things I'm most interested to know. Was he eutoxed? Did he have anything in his system? He wouldn't now, bro, you know, right? But did he? Because something was going on when he was away from home and wandering around all over the place. And if you've got a pain problem, that's what a lot of people do. They say the drug company isn't going to take care of it. I got to take care of this pain myself. See, I'm interested to know if he got disinhibited by that. And the audience is saying it's a good question. They think about it too. But I don't know of him. I don't know that answer. And if it turned out that there was any use, it would help to paint a little bit of a picture of a guy getting disinhibited a little bit. But it's not a popular thing to talk about. But I'd like to know that about him.
Look at the quality of life of these people. These are city workers with blowers.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of legalization, I have to tell you.
But this is the result of standing back. I mean, in all honesty, it's the result of policies standing back and saying, well, yeah, they're sick, so let's make them sicker by giving them all the stuff that they need to make them sick. It's like a round robin.
Well, yeah.
I don't understand it, Gary. Help me understand that.
Listen, I think you illustrate very well. I mean, look, the reality is that when it comes to legalization, again, you always have to sort of take the cloak off and see it morally. The reality is it's a follow the money kind of situation. Somebody's getting very rich on a lot of people walking around in hell. And then, you know, just to sort of make it look like you care, you know, let's offer help when it becomes too much. You know, the reality is that the legalization of drugs is a hideous thing, because the reality is that if you feel good for 2 seconds, it lies to you. It makes you think life is dandy, and the next thing you know, you got a problem, and you're probably, you know, you're potentially hurting other people. So it's one of those lies, you know, it's one of those lies.
And so does that.
And somebody's getting rich off of it.
Well, and that's where we have to ask ourselves, have we already crossed the line? Because we have a man here who's allegedly executed a guy in plain sight on video. And people have given him $1.4 million. Where have we gone wrong in the word? Now, I'm saying this in a bigger picture, not individually. Okay. Where have we as a society erased the line in the middle of the road? As you know, that analogy I always like to give. There's a broken line in the middle of a road, folks. Right. And there's a reason for that. It's because the reason those lines exist is the color red and the color blue argued in a legislative fashion. You know what? We need broken lines in the middle of the road. Why is that? They said. Well, so when this car crosses over and hits that person head on, we know that society says they were at fault. But what happens when you erase the line?
Yeah.
And there are no lines, and you cross over and you collide with one another. I'm here to tell you there is going to be, and mark my words, because I'm gonna say it right tonight. There will be an ICE officer killed. in the next couple of weeks if we do not get off this track, or another citizen. And because guys like that who can have $1.4 million brought in and celebrated, certainly law enforcement is a bad guy.
Well, the very great, I'm sure anyone in the audience who, or any Roman Catholics will remember Fulton Sheen, who used to have a television show, used to, in the full regalia, was always teaching on mainstream television. In fact, he beat Milton Berle in ratings. And Milton Berle famously said that's because his writers are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Well, he was a brilliant man. And he used to say that we were living in an era of false compassion. And I think that's really the heart of the problem, is that if you see everything as sickness instead of a moral problem, then you feel sorry for the wrong people. You feel sorry for the mugger instead of the mugged. And that's where it gets a little twisted. Yes, he is up for sainthood. That's true. So it's and he's buried at St. Patrick's near me. But it's very interesting how you can get confused by that. And of course, it's the essence of narcissism to externalize blame. It's not my fault. I'm just sick. Something out there, And I mean, look, how many people, when they go to court, you've seen it, they go to court, what's the first thing they do when they want to defend themselves? They give a sob story about how life was unfair, like as if there was no moral choice in what they did. They were compelled by having had a hard life. How are those things connected? Sometimes they can be, but usually doesn't it come across as a sob story a lot of times? Why did you kill so-and-so and rob all of his money? Look, I had a hard life. Mom didn't love me. Dad left. Mom was drinking. And then, all right, well, that was 25 years ago. And I understand the psychology of how people develop. They develop attachment problems. They develop resentments. I get it. But in the final analysis, you've got a choice. Unless, there are marionette strings pulling your hands, the difference between right and wrong. But unfortunately, we have a tendency to say, oh, come on, they were sick. They didn't know what they were doing, And that's why I worry about the heavy emphasis on mental illness whenever anything happens, because it comes across as a reduction in culpability. See, that's the whole thing. But these people know what to do. Do you think that this guy didn't know what he was doing when he put this ghost gun together?
Oh,
and wrote a manifesto, and you know what I'm saying? But I think that in order to understand what's going on, you have to see it through the lens of moral ambiguity and the idea that truth is a construction that can be fiddled with rather than being a simple, objective, black and white thing. Truth is true, and what's untrue is untrue, and that's the end of it. But unfortunately, we've made it rather wishy-washy.
And I think when it comes to true crime trials, of course, we all see the defense. And Chris,
right.
All the time says when they don't have a case, they blame law enforcement. They blame the police officer.
Right.
They blame the homicide detective. They blame the investigator who was called out at 3 o'clock in the morning, left their warm family home to go out, which is part of their job, and investigate a murder or multiple. And, yet to your point, Gary, again, in this true crime space, you see this all play out and in the courtroom drama. And, it's like at this point, it's the defense playbook. I think just look at the last couple of major cases, let alone, ones that go back even further, like an OJ case. I mean, look at the Koberger case, right?
Yeah.
To your point, I'm blameless, but the defense muddies the water. They point the finger at police who were there to investigate and do their job. Many times they can convince the jury that, maybe it was somebody else, or police did such a sloppy job, and they get off. And I think, and not all the time, but I think that's part of the story here, with this right and wrong and where we are and of what's allowed in our criminal court system is actually a reflection of society.
Well, that's it. It boils down to, it's interesting, and those who are Christians remember the story of Christ being asked by Pilate, "What is truth?" That's the question of the time. That's the question of the age. It's that cynical question of Pilate. What is truth? And it creates an irony about the fact that we call this the field of true crime. That's a true crime? Or is it kind of true? It's muddied crime. And who's committing the crime?
Less.
Yeah,
We can agree it's crime.
We like to think it's true crime because it appeals to our desire for justice, that ultimately we get to some black and white truth. But there's nothing black and white about it.
How about con?
That's got a funny, the little pun, the word con, and that.
But to your point, yeah,
Right.
what is true crime? I mean, what is the right? What is the wrong? I mean, is there a right and wrong? And I would submit to you that there are times where it appears wrong, but it turned out that it was actually the right thing. And I'll give you an example. I had a guy, I won't name his name. A gentleman stepped out in front of his house with a rifle and pointed it at the officer. He was a minister, the guy with the rifle. And the officer was responding to a domestic because the minister's wife had called the police, and the officer got there. And when he pulled up, the gentleman was standing in the front yard with his rifle, and he pointed it at the officer. And the officer had to fire, ended up taking the man's life. I had the officer in the interview room. The media was all over this thing.
Sure.
And the first thing he said to me, he said, he looks right at me and he's crying. And he says, "Chris, tell me one thing." And I said, "I can't right now, but what's your question?" He goes, "Was it loaded?" And guess what? It wasn't. It had no round in the chamber or in the magazine. It was suicide by cop. That officer today lives with that split-second decision.
Sure.
Every minute, every second of his life. The media ate him alive. Officer kills unarmed or unloaded gun-toting pastor. Imagine reading in the paper, "You killed a pastor," without realizing what the facts of the case was. And this is what scares me, not scares me, but what concerns me on a day-to-day basis when we see stuff, how fast information can travel in today's society. To your point, Gary, earlier.
Yeah, the dopamine drenched, rapid fire, facts don't matter world.
Yes. And so how many people are judging, and it just keeps multiplying. And then you have third world people, the parasite people, quote unquote, pushing the narrative. The politicians pushing the narrative. We're going to give Tyler Robinson the death penalty. You have a former president weighing in saying ICE is wrong in this last shooting. What? Stay out of it until you know what the truth is. Because this is how other people get hurt. And the problem that I'm having with all of this is they know what they're doing. And I ask myself, why are they doing it? Why are they doing it? These are federal officers going to get people who are raping children, murdering people, and the list goes on. Okay? They're not going to get your guy, for cement. Okay? Trust me. Okay? And by the way, they've been doing this forever, since we had laws in this country. It's Title 18. It's a federal law. Did you know in California it used to be a felony in 1982 to enter this country illegally? And the California legislators changed the law. Did you know we used to arrest the people for being in the country in 1982, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89 for felony crimes for just crossing the border? It was a felony. And guess what? We had the option, if you were a dog handler, to use a dog for apprehension if they ran. Now, I didn't do that. But that was the use of force that you could get to. Think about that. Today, they have softened the rules to the point where a girl named Riley Lakin goes to college in Georgia. Do you want to catch that guy if he had a warrant? Or would you rather just put her in the bucket, let her go? This is what we're talking about in this country. Do their lives matter anymore? What about the guy who killed Marin? What about the jogger? She's just running in a park. Now, I know people always are going to say, well, yeah, those are odds and ends, but they happened. And the perpetrators had a commonality. And these are the kind of people they're trying to capture. They're not interested in the guy with the trowel and the cement. They want these really bad dudes out of this country. And what about the 12-year-old? Great. Thank you. In Houston, who was raped and thrown under a bridge. 2 individuals. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. All of these people have been given orders to get out by the courts. They've already had due process. It's already occurred. That's why they have warrants. That's how they know where they are. And they're trying to get them out of the country. Do we want another? Do we want another 9/11? You're going to wake up one day, and you've heard me say this before, Gary. We're going to wake up, multi-shooters, multi-targets, all soft, same time, same moment across this country. And it will be schools. It'll be schools. I guarantee it.
That's a depressing thought. But my understanding, Chris, my understanding is that the issue that, and I don't want to wade into this, I'm being very silent intentionally about this, but my understanding is that the problem a lot of people have is that there is a kind of a uniform immunity for the ICE officers, so that if somebody is killed, there isn't a adjudication of whether the person used inappropriate force or whatever, so that it feels unfair. No. Are there going to be trials, for example, in a good case? Or that's what I think people are upset about.
If the shoot is righteous, if it's a good shoot, i.e., all of the elements were there that your life was threatened, somebody else's life was threatened, the individual was armed, they shot at you, they pointed a gun at you, they rammed a car in you.
There's no charge, in other words. There's no hearing. There's no.
That is the officer immunity. However, if the officer used bad judgment in any way, shape, or form, then under the color of authority, Title 42 kicks in. That officer can be arrested and charged with civil rights violations. Evident of the fact that the 4 officers in the Rodney King case stood trial, and were ultimately convicted by a federal court in Rodney King.
See, that's very interesting. Like, so for example, and again, I want to be, I'm treading very carefully because I don't want to wade into a political matter. But my understanding is, for example, a lot of people felt that in the Good case, for example, that an officer in that situation couldn't even fire at the tires of the vehicle. Would have been trained that you couldn't do that. So they say, well, then there should be a hearing about why a firearm was used in that situation. In other words, there's people, I think the anger a lot of people have is that they feel that if you give people an immunity, they'll do whatever they want to do. See, and I think that's where it gets a little murky. Right. And that's where it's valuable to hear what you're saying.
Here's the reality of the training. Okay. Right. Officers can use whatever's force necessary to stop the threat.
And they are officers? Are they deputized?
Well, they're federal officers. They go to Glencoe, Georgia, at the training academy down there.
Is that true? I didn't know that's where they get trained.
These guys, think about it, what they call a federal task force. A federal task force is made up of local and federal officers. Now think about that. You ever heard of HIDTA? HIDTA?
Oh.
High impact drug trafficking. Okay.
Yes.
That's a federal task force. And by the way, on that task force are Minneapolis police officers.
Oh, interesting.
Some of those guys could be helping in the ICE situation. They could be on the street because they're cross-sworn, state and federal. They have federal authority and they have state authority. They're cross-sworn. So think about this, okay? The training that the officers have is when you pull a car and point it at an officer and you're coming at the officer, okay? You have the option, if your life is in danger, to save your life. You don't have to say, well, I had to shoot the tires out. Okay? Because what if he misses and a round skips and hits an innocent bystander? Then what? Now the officer sued for an unlawful death. Okay? In this situation, if that officer was hit by the car, which by the way he was, okay? And by the way, that was the second time he was drugged a couple of blocks the first time.
I heard that. Yeah.
And now the second time, his frame of mind is, how come nobody's asking, why is this woman in the middle of the street with a car blocking a federal law enforcement action? What's going on there? Why is her friend jumping out of the car to film what's going on? By the way, I don't think that person's out of the loop yet. She could be subject to accessory after the fact, to murder, by the way. Okay? Because it shifts the burden to the survivors. It's like going to a bank robbery, okay, and saying, Frank, you go in, I'll wait here in the car. Just because she got out of the car, she had a camera and she was filming the event. Okay. That puts her in the circle to what they call a 32 is what it's called, PC 32. Okay. Because first of all, were you in the car? Yeah. You got out of the car? Yeah. Why'd you get out of the car? To film it. Whoa, wait a minute. Now go to a bank robbery. Frank, I'll drive you. You get out. And Frank runs into the bank and goes, give me your money. And one of the clerks says, I'm not giving you your money. Boom. That clerk is dead. And Frank runs back to the car and jumps in. Okay. And there's a pursuit. Frank gets shot by the cops who were pursuing. Guess what? The driver is charged, because Frank's dead, with first-degree murder of the clerk at the bank. And that is the same scenario where if the officer fired and it's a justifiable shooting, that second person in the car who got out to film it has some serious exposure. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. And so these are the kind of things that even the most recent thing, it's okay to protest. That's not a problem. Do it all day long, as much as you want, as human beings. Okay. That's the Constitution. Okay. Don't stand in front of cars. Don't bring guns to a potential gunfight, because everybody on that side has a gun, i.e. law enforcement, every one of them. Okay. And if you're just one guy with one gun, well, that's not the sharpest tool in the shed, if you ask me. Okay. And then don't jump in when they're doing something. Stay back. Leave them alone. Let them do their job. Now, later on, if you didn't like it, not a problem. Go down, hammer, pound on the table, write your congressman, do whatever you want. Okay. But leave them alone in the field. People are going to continue to get hurt, and it keeps escalating, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop. Okay. It really does. And in New York, I mean, you guys, you've got people putting bricks out on the street before protests even occur. Did you know that, Gary?
No.
That tactic was used a lot over the past couple of years. Definitely since COVID, we've heard a lot about that.
There are organized groups that order pallets of bricks and they drop them on city corners.
Oh, I see. So they can be hurled, you mean?
Yeah, and they throw them at the cops, or they throw them through the store windows. And then they create all havoc. Okay? I'll tell you what, you haven't lived until you pull up in LA and you see the entire South Central Los Angeles on fire. Okay? I remember the night we pulled into Los Angeles. They sent us to the Coliseum. And I remember coming over, getting off of the 5, and there were 25 cars, and there were 4 of us each, 4 deep. We had 100 guys. And I remember pulling in and seeing the fires burning in South Central LA. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is hell. And the first night we were there, we went to Koreatown, and they were shooting at us. There were a couple of Korean guys. They were guarding their businesses. And this was the first night. And then the second night, we were taking over shopping centers. And then the National Guard would come in behind us after the governor declared martial law. Mm. And you have not lived until you've seen the destruction of what human beings can do to their own communities and their own cities. Okay. Mm. And watch everything burn. They started shooting the firemen. They started shooting at the fire trucks. Okay. And it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And where I'm seeing this go is because that escalated quickly at Figueroa is where it started. And it escalated rapidly. Okay. And the kind of things that we're starting to see is this escalation. But here's going to be the bottom line. Ultimately, I think, I could be wrong, that city's going to be destroyed. It's not going to destroy the U.S. They're going to destroy every part of their infrastructure. Go to South Central Los Angeles today. That infrastructure is ruined. It's ruined. And it happened during the Floyd riots and all this other stuff back in Minneapolis the first time. Now they're just going to add more on top of it, and it's just going to get bad, and it's going to go from bad to worse. And that's the real pain in the totality.
The concern that I have is the false positive rate. Picking people up who actually are legally here, where I didn't have my papers on me, that kind of thing. And and it's a very disturbing experience for people, I'm sure, that are picked up, the period that they're away from home. They just feel that they've just been snatched up and are confused. Some may not be speaking English, and there may not be translation services. They may not, the problem with it is that there is a false positive rate. There are people that are getting picked up in the net. Well, and I think that's got everybody very scared, because it's like this, it feels as if like there isn't a tidy process.
Okay, well, wait a minute. But what's the other side of that coin?
Right, because that's what people in the audience are saying, that they're concerned. Yeah.
False positive rate. Are they being deported? That's my question.
No, I understand, but I think what people are saying
they're being identified.
They're scared by it.
They're okay. Now think about this just for a second. Okay. I'm a guy who's, in terms of if I was, CBP. Okay.
Yeah.
What's your name? ¿Cuál es tu nombre?
Oh, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't speak English. Oh, whoa. That's a red flag. Okay. Were you born here? No comprende, amigo. Okay, siéntese aquí. Venga aquí. Siéntese. Come over here and sit down. Okay. I need to figure out who you are.
Right.
Okay. Now, is that a false positive?
I mean, I think a false positive is where a person is taken away and detained, and then it turns out that they had papers and
the government says, guess what?
Right.
You're okay. Go home.
I understand, but that's what people in the audience are saying that they find scary.
That's fine, but what about the other guy who has murdered 3 people in Guatemala, in Antigua, and Guatemala has what they call a red flag warrant in the system.
Right. In other words, what is the balance between that this is just the unfortunate process of doing something that ultimately is needed, and so like this gets very similar, for example, to a discussion that I've had with colleagues of mine that are trying to use AI to catch language on social media that might tip law enforcement off that somebody is like a potential shooter or something like that. And the problem is there would be a high false positive rate. You would have feds, knocking on the door of people that are just blowing off steam and saying bizarre things on the internet. So then it gets into an ethical question, like, is catching a few people worth this sort of frightening process that starts getting complicated in terms of constitutional rights and all kinds of. So it's an interesting question, and I think people in the audience are raising it is that they're basically saying, look, we because I'm reading everything everybody's saying. They're basically saying, like, yeah, it's necessary to find criminals that are here illegally, but is there a way to do it that isn't so frightening to the general population and doesn't have a high false positive rate? That's what they're basically.
I agree, but let's also go back to Ellis Island, shall we?
No, that was pretty scary too.
Okay, well, wait a minute. How many weeks did they detain somebody?
Sometimes
that's what it was for. Sometimes a long time. My whole family came through there.
Came over when they were sick or had a disease or
well,
something.
Why didn't you just walk across the border, Gary, with your family?
Right, exactly. There's a legal way to do things.
That's the point.
I know.
So we can't say, well, they're doing something wrong when the politicians don't want to do something right. They can fix this problem real easily. Okay. It is not rocket science. You give everybody, and by the way, let me tell you something about San Diego County. We had more people who were not legal come across the border in work in the agricultural fields, and every single day would go home to TJ with that money. And the next morning they'd wake up and they'd come cross the border. And it was a temporary work situation. It was a temporary work permit. This country can fix this in 2 minutes. And here's the 2 minutes. Okay. You create a temporary work visa program for the individuals who need it. Your craftsmen, your laborer, whoever, okay? Your business owners. I mean, I know a lot of people who run businesses who are not legal, okay? And when I say legal, they didn't come through the front door, okay? They came under the fence. That's different. That's what this country needs to fix. And they can fix it, quite frankly, in with a couple of bills with bipartisan support, and everybody can be happy. And guess what's left? What's left are all of these individuals who have committed crimes, not only in this country, but have committed crimes in other countries. It's not rocket science. We just don't want to fix it.
Right. But actually, Chris, what you're saying is the same thing the people in the audience are saying, which is that it's about finding a way to do it that's less frightening and disorganized. And,
We did it.
right. Yeah.
Well, I love these people that say, well, we're all immigrants. Well, guess what? The other side of that coin is we're all legal immigrants.
Right. I understand.
Because all of our ancestors came through Ellis Island.
Did yours or mine did?
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. In fact,
Some of my relatives did not get in to Ellis Island and had to go to Argentina.
oh, is that true? That's fascinating. I
They
didn't
were
know
Eastern European Jews in
that.
the late 1880s who suffered through the pogroms in Eastern Europe. So a few were able to come here, but the rest had to go to South America. Change the course of my family, and that's the same story for millions of other Americans as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. There are people, Gary, you know more than anybody. You're at the district court there in New York City, where immigration's always at the top of the coin. Okay, but there are people that want to come to this country, capture the dream, and we are this country that says, "Come on, keep coming. We need, keep coming." By the way, did you know the birth rate for the United States is 1.6 right now? The lowest birth rate ever recorded in the United States of America.
It's interesting to speculate about what that's about.
Well, it's going to tell us something in the next 10, 15 years, because the family unit is shrinking. Okay. And so when you start thinking about those numbers, okay, they become very critical, okay, to the survival of this country. Okay. And when we start thinking about this, overlaying that on top of, what's happening in this country, it's not hard to tell people, look, you're wanted here. We want you here. Okay. Have you committed a crime? No. Okay. Do you have family? Yes. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Here's the rules in the United States. Okay. We want, and put your hand up. Okay. Congratulations. You are a citizen of the United States. Okay. What happened to our rule of law in this country? Why are we fighting between blue and red over the rule of law? Guess what we're doing? We're erasing that line in the middle. And the only people who are really going to suffer, did you know right now they got people from Rwanda who don't speak English taking care of autistic children in the healthcare field?
Autistic adults who are wards of the state.
There's going to be a big case going to be breaking out where a guy got $17 million for taking care of autistic children
adults.
Adults.
These are wards of the state.
And guess what? They don't speak a lick of English. And they've already had one death where this kid was not supposed to be eating a certain food and he choked. And the caretaker is an illegal from Rwanda, a third world country.
We'll save that story for another day.
Is this what we want for these kids or for these adults?
It's been an interesting conversation, but I think that it's interesting the way that all of these things are variations on a theme that does bring us back to the original point about the Mangione case, because it really, as I said earlier, I think the central question is, what is truth? That's really what this is all about. And it's been this fascinating discussion where you could see things from all different angles and kind of pick at it and whatever. And I appreciate it. I think what I hope we're modeling for people in this conversation is that you can have civil conversations about things. You don't have to be killing each other. You just sit down and you talk your ideas out, and you know what I mean? You sort of, and you arrive in the middle. And I really appreciate that. But I think to tie it back to the Mangione thing, what it really comes down to is, what is wrong with a society that can take a homicide and somehow equivocate that it can be that it's just from a certain angle, and that's where I think things get a little confusing and scary, and that's what I meant when I say it's almost like a diabolical process, because it feels as if the truth has been confused on purpose, but I'm really appreciating the conversation, just so so the audience understands. I think it's a good thing to talk like this, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
It's important. Now I have to head out in a minute, actually, because I have an early day. But regarding Mangione, is there anything else we should be discussing about him, about that case, in terms of what's coming down the pike?
Well, he's scheduled to be back in federal court in just a couple days on January 30th.
Right. I saw that news.
Yeah. And what's interesting too, there was a recent state court hearing, which is obviously separate from the federal case, where Mangione's defense lawyers say that, going back to Altoona, Pennsylvania, where he was arrested, that the police there, the search of his backpack, again, they're going back to this point, was illegal because police hadn't yet obtained a warrant. And the judge in that state case said he's going to rule on the evidence issues in May, so a few months from now. And again, what's interesting is the federal court judge, she made a point in Friday's hearing to say that she's not going to allow her case on the federal level to turn into some kind of extension of the state's case.
I see.
Called it a state hearing by proxy. So the two want to remain independent of each other in terms of rulings and decisions. We'll see how that all plays out. We really don't know yet.
Well, there are people in the audience saying that, things like, oh, I'd love to really know what his motive was or whatever. I mean, if he wrote what is written in the Red Notebook, we know what the motive was, at least in his own mind. Right, Chris? I mean, he's basically saying,
go ahead.
They'll get handwriting experts and prove that he wrote it, and that'll be the. I mean, the fact is, if he wrote it, it's essentially a confession. It's very clear, and the motivation, at least what's written in there, at least what he wanted people to see as the motivation, was that he felt that he was striking a blow against what he saw as a parasitic group, a parasitic group of people. And but I just don't think, I mean, you tell me if you're wrong, but if you were sitting in a jury and that was presented as the motivation, would you say, oh, well, then I guess this person shouldn't be convicted? Or would you say, well, you knew what you were doing and there's no declared war that justifies this. You can't take things in your own hands and that's the end of it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you killed a bully, wouldn't you go to jail? Even if they were bullying you? If they pulled a gun on you and threatened to kill you, and you defended yourself, that's another matter. But
Well,
if you said somebody bullied me, I'm mad at them, and I'm going to go behind their back and shoot them while they're walking on the street, I don't know how there's any justification.
You guys
Well,
in New York had the guy that took the guy out. He choked him out, the former Marine.
Right, I
They
remember.
put that guy on trial.
You mean the Penny case? Yeah.
I think, well, yeah. What was back? Who was it was it the 80s? That guy that shot the kids, the 4 kids. What was his name?
Sure, I know what you're talking about, but I have to think about it.
It'll come to you in a second. But the guy was just defending the woman, and he ended up choking the guy out. And they
You mean on the train, yeah.
on the train, and they put him on trial. I was like,
But this, Chris, I'm trying to tell you, I'm asking you as a cop,
yeah,
if you showed up at a scene and you said to somebody, why'd you kill that guy? Well, I was mad at him because he stood for a group of people that I feel bully me. So I hunted him down, stalked him, went up behind him, and shot him to death.
yeah,
Would
you're
you
going to
feel
jail.
that was justified? I mean, that's just it. And you have a notebook where somebody is laying out. I mean, it's very clear. If he wrote what's in that notebook and was in a clear state of mind, I mean, what you're talking about is a situation where somebody's basically telling you, I projected onto this random individual my anger towards this group that I feel is unjust. Right? And you're talking about a situation where the guy wasn't even coming at him. You're talking about coming behind a person.
Yeah, exactly.
And shooting them. I mean, there is, I don't know how you explain it. And then, this whole thing of people going like, wow, isn't that sexy? He stands up to bullies and whatever. I don't know. Last time I checked, a bully is not somebody that's got their back turned to you. I mean, that looks kind of wimpy.
Gary, regarding the notebook and what was written, it's like that saying, when they tell you who they are, believe them.
Right. Yeah. I think Maya Angelou. Yes. It's so true. Right. But isn't it cowardly to shoot somebody who? It's sort of like Koberger attacking people asleep. It adds a layer of wimpy. It's cowardly. It's not. I don't get the part of it being desirable to people. I just don't get that.
Why the manifesto with these guys?
Because ultimately, it's about wanting the praise and the attention for being seen as a heroic figure that did it for a reason, that rallies the public for. And, so the idea is that the narcissism manifests as this need to kind of write an evangel or a kind of a reason for what you did, as if, but I think on an unconscious level, perhaps it's a way of masking the personal arrogant motivations. And it's funny, Chris, where this conversation went. When I appeared on Vinnie Politan on Court TV right after this happened, I think it was when they hadn't even caught Mangione, if I remember correctly. And I said, I suspect, this is going to be some person with a personal motive masquerading, as having a noble motive. And then I said, this guy, whoever he is like, he is a microcosm of what's wrong with the whole narcissistic culture. Right. And I don't even think they had caught him yet. And then maybe they had, I don't remember, but it's true, isn't it? That it's like you look at it and and am I the only one who heard that they're talking about making a musical about him?
I don't know. You're near Broadway.
That's surprise us.
Like going to play next to Hamilton or something, like, it's supposed to be some kind of heroic figure. I mean, this is just.
But isn't that a symptomology of what's wrong?
It's twisted. I remember Ann Burgess telling me that one of the things that bothered her most was seeing somebody wearing a T-shirt with the face of the Unabomber, like as if he was like an icon, and she just thought it was so gross. So I remember when I interviewed her when she wrote her book, not the second to last one. She talked about that, about being one of those things at the heart of why she's so victim focused, is how disgusting that is. Like, this guy killed people, like, and you're wearing them on your shirt. So, but look, I think it's been a fascinating discussion.
Yes.
I can't wait to see. I don't know what defense they're going to go for. I mean, I really don't. I mean, look, you could find these kind of characters in there, in the scale. And there have been a lot of cases lately that have made the book pertinent. What's up, Karen?
Tell us again where Luigi Mangione would be on your
If
scale
he's guilty,
in your
well, he's not a serial killer, right? So if he's guilty, he's not a serial killer. He's just a one-time shooter. And people that assassinate public figures, to call attention to causes and things like that, tend to fall into the kind of narcissistic camp. Usually they'd be sort of like category 7, right? And so we have to see. But generally, to understand this case, you have to think about the personalities and the motives of assassins, because it's much more like an assassination case. I don't think he falls into the camp of the psychotic or the anarchist or I think it's really that type that, or the martyr that wants to lay down his own life, that expects to get killed also, but seems to fall into that kind of John Wilkes Booth narcissist, make everybody pay attention to me camp. And unfortunately, the public plays right along with it.
The only reason I crossed over into the kind of
fascinating
conversation was because I think we're seeing a trend here.
Yeah, there is a trend.
I think, and there is that underlining red-blue concept underneath it.
Right.
And I was curious I wanted to tap your mind tonight. The one thing that the audience, hopefully you guys understand, Gary and I have just some amazing conversations off of the screen here for hours and hours and hours. And by the way, we don't always agree.
No.
But what we don't let get in between us is the fact that our friendship comes first. And we both know, that tomorrow we're going to wake up and it's going to be different. The world's going to change and we're going to have a conversation about that too. And we're hoping that you in our audience, don't necessarily think that this is a thought process that's polarizing. It's not. We are generally concerned. Each of us, Gary comes at it from a different perspective than me, than Karen.
All of us.
Each of us has an opinion. And guess what? They're all right. It doesn't have to be just this is it. And the more I think we spread that kind of concept and, get that out there into the world, the more people like this get to come home at night.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gary.
Have you heard anything about his family? I was curious.
Well, his boys were 16 and 19 when he was killed. So, it's been a year. So one is 17 and one is 20 now. At the time he was estranged from his wife, they were living in separate places. He was living a couple blocks away. She was living in the house. They were co-parenting. It looks like they were having some domestic violence, or not violence. They were having domestic issues at the time. However, since this time, the family has come, galvanized themselves around their mother, the boys, and they have 100% supporting her through the upcoming, close to the trial coming up.
Well, our hearts go out to them. Our hearts go out to them. It's sad as can be. And also, why do we never hear anything about Mangione's family? Had they written him off? Had there been a fight? Had there been, what's going on there?
I don't have that answer.
I think there's more to that story. And, I think we're going to find out that this thing of having a physical problem and nobody helped me, it has a deeper meaning. Like, let's say you're a social failure, for some reason you're not dating or whatever, and you're blaming it on a physical ailment, but you feel like a social failure, or there's something about you that you're embarrassed about, or you're keeping from people, or your family isn't supporting you, or they're rejecting you, or they don't believe what you believe, or whatever. Something's going on there and we don't know what it is, But the other thing I definitely want to make sure I get a chance to say is this before we end. One of the things I'm finding saddest about what's going on right now is that there are some people that are so angry in the polarization that they're forgetting that America, in the final analysis, is a good place. They're starting to hate their own country. And there's a reason that all these people want to come here. If you lived for 5 minutes in most other places, you would say, I'll take this place, warts and all, over that place. And I just think it's very, very important to kind of remember, like, we're going through growing pains. You know, the things that we stand for philosophically and spiritually are like a tree that needs watering every once in a while, or it dies. I think what's going on is a process of remembering what actually matters in the world. We've lost sight of it, and we got too dark. And I think that sometimes the good Lord uses these things to remind us of the truth and what matters, and that there do need to be guardrails and things that we believe. And I think in the final analysis, this will somehow get used for growth. But it is a scary time, and there's a lot of people in the audience that are scared. But just remember that in the end, everything is sort of in hand in that higher place. And I think ultimately this will be used for good. Do I think we're going through a dark time? Yes, I do. And it is one of those times when two people could be sitting at a dinner table in the same family and hate each other. That's happened before, and we got over it before. But it's hard. It's hard. I mean, Chris, you've been through it a few times historically, haven't you?
Well, I was born in 1959. I'm 66 years old.
Saying it more than once.
I've seen our society take shifts, but I've never seen it shift this far.
No, but I think the last time it did, probably the 1860s.
Yeah, I've seen history where it has shifted in other countries. I'm worried about Europe. I'm worried about
all the democracy.
A lot of things happening in the world, and it's a very interesting time. But to your point, here's always the good thing. Okay, we're all in this together,
right?
And at some point, just like where were you when we talk about September 11th? Where were you September 10th? That's the question I always ask people.
September 11th is a hard thing for me to talk about because I was very affected by it.
I know that's my point.
Yeah.
But where were you September 10th? That's the point.
Right.
Because there will be a September 11th. Now, whatever that means, it's not necessarily the same exact type of problem. I'm just saying there will be problems. The world is like that. Okay. And
I know
it's how we think about when it happens. What did we become? And what we became was American citizens. That's where I want people to think about the totality of what's going on in this country and what's going on in America. I'm not red. I'm not blue. Okay. I'm not green. I'm not you. Okay. But what I am is an American citizen. And I guarantee you, my father fought in World War II, Korea. He was one of 15 guys that came out of the Chosin Reservoir. He was hitting communist China, Chinese, with shovels. He's in a book called Colder Than Hell. It's right behind me, written by Joe Owens. Okay. He was one of 15 guys that survived. He's buried in Arlington National Cemetery with my mother. Okay. And I'm telling you, I came from a family that grew up on a military installation. Every evening at 6:00, taps would go and they would lower the flag. Yeah. And you as a kid had to stop on the base and you had to turn and face main side. And if the MPs caught you not doing it, your parents, your dad specifically, because my dad in the Marine Corps at the time, were in big trouble. Remember in The Three Amigos?
Oh, yeah.
Where he goes, El Guapo, and he takes the bullet and he goes, "You're in big trouble, mister." Real bullets. Okay.
I remember.
That El Guapo, well, you had an El Guapo moment. If the MPs walk up, because the first thing they say is, "Do you have your independent ID card or your dependent ID card?" "Yes, sir." What's your father's social security number? And then you'd have to recite it back to him. That's how it worked. Okay. I just wanted to see, and by the way, we didn't care what race you were, where you came from, because everybody's dad was a Marine.
Yeah.
Everybody's father. And guess what? You would go out in town, it was the same way. When's the last time, instead of worrying about what's happening, across the country, when's the last time you took a blanket across the street to your neighbor?
Right.
And
that's a good question.
And gave them, just 5 minutes of your time. When's the last time? What do you even know your neighbor? I mean, in Boston, when my dad was in Vietnam, we'd go to Boston, and my grandmother lived in a triple decker, the top floor. The guy would lean out. His name was Mr. Jansky. And we go, Mr. Jansky, how are you, sir? And he'd lean over and go, I'm going to tell your parents, you guys knock it off. Okay? And then you'd go in and your mother would say, did he get on you? Yeah. What were you doing? I didn't do anything, Ma. Okay. Are you sure about that? Yeah. Okay, I'll go ask him. And guess what? He did it because he cared about you. We need to get back to this idea that says, guess what? You and I, we may have differences, but really, there's no letter I in the word team. And we all came from the same God, whether it's the universe that you believe in, whether it's, Mother Earth, Father Sky, Yatahe, Dane, Nihongo Ashabara Skoshide, I speak a little Japanese. Okay. It doesn't matter. We're all in this together, and we've got to figure this out. We really do.
Oh, yeah. Well, you remember on that wonderful Ken Burns documentary on the Civil War that PBS did years ago. Remember it, Chris? With Shelby Foote, where he would comment. I think it was Shelby Foote who said this, and it sort of stuck with me for years. It may have been someone else, but I think he's the one who said it. He said that historians noticed that before the Civil War, it was considered grammatically correct to say the United States are. And that after the Civil War, we started to say the United States is. And he said, that's how you sum up the American Civil War. It was necessary for us to transition from an us to an is, to an a are to an is. Well, that's true. That's ultimate, and I think that's the phase we're going through again. It's the reminder, the pulling back together. But it's going to be a dark time until we get there. But I love the point you made about hypocrisy. That whenever we're shaking our fist at somebody and saying you're not righteous, you're whatever, at the same time look in the mirror and say, and what have I done for anyone? Have I brought a blanket across the street to anybody? And sometimes it's embarrassing when you realize that as you're screaming at somebody, you're not doing anything yourself, So I like that. And I also believe that the settling of this stuff happens on a very small scale. We can't all go out and change the minds of everybody in the world. But if you could talk to your neighbor or one person, you could have a civil debate with somebody and a calm debate with somebody and a kind conversation with somebody. And in that microcosm way, you wind up with 2 less people going out and joining the fray, right? If everybody just goes out and sort of de-escalates and is kind, it actually makes a very big difference. It really does. Wouldn't you say? It's all you've got is your little corner of the garden, can't take care of everybody. So, but I think it's been a fruitful conversation. I think, as I said, I mean, obviously Mangione is innocent until proven guilty. But I mean, if it turns out that he is indeed the guy who wrote what's in the notebook, I mean, I think he was pretty clear with what the motivations were. And it's going to be interesting to see how anybody tries to explain that. That's why I think this is the classic case where you attack procedure, because you don't have much of a case otherwise. They shouldn't have arrested him. They shouldn't have done it that way. They shouldn't have, he can't get a fair trial. You attack procedure like that when there's no substance to the case. I mean, the guy's primping in front of a camera like he's proud of it. I mean, I don't know how to argue, so, and let's just say, Chris, that is somebody who I do not think would have an easy time in prison.
Oh, no.
I would not want to be Mr. Mangione in prison.
Any thoughts, Karen?
No. Would you want to be him, Karen?
What was that, Gary?
Would you want to be Mangione in prison?
I wouldn't. I don't even like to think about prison. I mean, that's one awful place, but it's where those convicted belong. Get them off our streets. We have to make this a safer place. Justice always first, and justice for the victims as well.
That's it. I mean, Kohlberger hasn't fared well so far.
No.
Still complaining about his bananas. Still mad about his bananas, Chris?
Oh, there's more coming. I can't talk about it right now because I'm under the cone of silence with chaos and Max and Agent 99 from.
Man, I love
Get Smart.
I used to love Get Smart.
It's the best. Missed it by that much.
That's right. He goes, 99, do you have a hairpin? Sorry, Max, I don't. Well, I do. And he'd reach up and he goes,
With the shoe
that's what I thought. Electric grass.
So good.
That was a Mel Brooks. Do you know that was a Mel Brooks thing? Mel Brooks produced that, didn't he?
I don't know. Did he produce that?
Yeah, and it shouldn't surprise you because it's his humor. Exactly. I was on a Mel Brooks kick the past few days because I needed a good laugh, and I was watching Young Frankenstein.
Oh my!
I was rolling every single time the horses would bray, whatever they'd say, Frau Blucher.
Yeah. How about when Marty Feller comes back with Abby Normal?
Oh, I love that.
Normal.
Abby Normal. What hump? Oh, I love it.
You guys are the best out there. Gary, thank you so much for coming on.
It was a great conversation.
Let's go to Hawaii. Aloha, everybody. Continue to take care of each other. See you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.